Welcome to Pop and Play, the podcast all about play in its many silly, serious, and powerful forms. I'm Nathan Holbert.
And I'm Haeny and And today we're bringing you another pop-off, a short episode where Nathan and I have a conversation about play and pop culture as it's currently happening or being reflected in the world. And let's be real, stuff that we're popping off about in class.
There's a lot of stuff to pop off on these days.
Yes. But before we get into that, we'd like to tell you about our next Playdate.
Playdate. We got another Playdate coming up. As a reminder, instead of waiting till the spring to release all of our episodes, we're releasing them approximately every 2 weeks. So you should be finding these episodes in your feed every 2 weeks on Tuesday. And as you already know, because we've done a few of these Playdates so far, or at least one of these Playdates so far, a Playdate is a time where we, Haeny and I, play some activity, we experience some form of play, and we invite you ahead of time to play along with us, to have that same experience on your own, and then join us for that conversation with an expert or a guest about that specific form of play. We have a new play date coming up. Haeny, you want to make sure our audience knows what our play date is?
Sure, that's right. Our next play date will be...
Dun, 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 dun.
Woodworking.
Woodworking.
Yes. Put on your flannel, pick up your axe, and channel your inner Ron Swanson. Sorry, Parks and Rec ref, if you don't know.
I should have worn a flannel today just to really sell
I will say, though, if you don't get to woodwork, you don't get to put on your flannel, you don't get to pick up an axe, you don't channel your inner Ron Swanson, you can still listen to that episode.
That's right. Join us either way.
Yeah.
But what are we talking about today, Haeny?
Today we are talking about the purpose of education.
Another small topic.
Yes. So I thought we should talk about what is education for?
Sure.
And is school the right place for it to happen?
Whoa, that is not I love that framing. I'm very excited about that framing. Are schools the right system or model for doing what we believe to be important for the process of learning, socialization, all that stuff?
What's your quick 10-second answer to that?
Oh, man. One thing I do love hearing people say is the reason we do work in schools is because schools are where the children are. And I think that's an important thing to recognize, and we should value that. I think there's something very important and valuable about kind of collectively, through our tax dollars, investing in education. I don't think that school as a system that's currently structured the way it is always the best place for the wide range of things we want young people to learn.
Yeah.
And I have more to say, but I'll let you go now.
And maybe it's good then to parse out education and schooling.
Okay, good.
Right?
Good.
Because I feel like sometimes we automatically think just because someone is schooled that they are educated. Right, which are I think are two different things. Like learning and education is different.
You're going to school us now, though, right?
I don't know. I don't know if I'm going to. Okay, so let me tell you why I wanted to even talk about this in the first place. Okay, so I looked at one of the latest Pew Center reports, right, and it's from 2024. And I feel like a lot of times, whatever comes out, whatever research and statistics come out of the Pew Center gets taken up by education writ large.
Yep.
Right, and so. A recent report was talking about teachers and their satisfaction and just the work that they're doing. And so I wanted to parse out like 3 bullet points about things that teachers are talking about in their classrooms, right? And so it said 47% of teachers say students show little or no interest in learning. That 33% say students being distracted by their cell phones is a major problem, and 72% in high school settings say this is a major problem. That 1 in 5 teachers say students getting up and walking around, I'm not making this up, I'm like literally reading.
You're reading it from the...
Getting up and walking around when they're not supposed to and being disrespectful towards them are major problems. And teachers in elementary and middle schools are more likely to say those things. So let's talk for a minute about the narrative.
More than 1 in 5 teachers in elementary school are complaining about kids getting up when they're not supposed to. Okay.
Yeah. So let's take so this episode is not about teachers, right? Because I think we both said this, right? Teachers have a really hard job and they're doing hard work, and in no way do we ever want to do any kind of thing where we talk about how bad of a job teachers are doing, right? I think though this says a very, at least calls on a larger narrative of what we think school is for,
Yes,
right?
yes,
So what messages are you getting from this?
Whew, when I look at those stats, I want to hang my head in shame, first of all. I think the 47% of teachers say students show little to no interest in learning that's half of teachers have this impression of young people. And, the first thing I want to point out about that particular framing is it's entirely about the student. It's positioning learning as a thing that students either want or don't want, and that it's their fault if they don't want it, right? As opposed to kind of recognizing that school takes place in a context, and a classroom is a context, and a kid has all sorts of things going on in their lives, and they have interests and all these kinds of things that all of that come together to kind of create the conditions for somebody having an interest in learning. But that's missing from that context. And then the cell phone one, we could go on a whole thing on that. In New York City this year, actually in New York State, I believe this year, there's a cell phone ban. So cell phones are not allowed in any schools. And I have my kids have to put their phones in these special pouches and all that stuff.
Like they're going to a Broadway show?
Like they're at a Broadway show.
But you don't get to see a Broadway show.
I mean, their schools are cool. And then the last one being this, like, getting up and walking around. That one just feels insane to me. The idea that's a thing I have to be upset or frustrated. So you asked me a more simple question, which was like, what impression am I getting? And I'm getting the impression that, like, kids are the problem. And they're not behaving properly in school. They're not having the right attitudes. And part of the reason they're not having the right attitudes is they want to move and they want to have their phones out.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's all
and they want to
students.
learn things that we're not necessarily willing or able to teach them.
Right.
Yeah. And I do feel like it's like a larger indictment of what we think school is actually for and why kids will want to go there, right? So if I think about like showing little or no interest in learning, I think, I've never actually met anyone who has no interest in learning something. Right. And I think it just really depends on whether it's something that I want to learn about, right? Like, for instance, just this week I spent a lot of time on TikTok learning.
Weird. Is that unusual for you?
Okay. Anyway, one of the enormous amounts of time I spent on that was learning how to hem my pants, right? Because I went to the dry cleaner recently, like altered a whole bunch of stuff, but it cost me so much money that I'm like, I need to freaking learn how to hem my own pants.
Hem your pants.
Yes.
I thought you said hide my pants.
No,
I was
not
so
hide
confused
my
for a minute there.
Yeah, that would be very scandalous, so we don't want to do that. But I feel like because I'm interested in that, it's a skill that I want to learn, that I am willing to watch anybody in a boring voice or however, like really show me how to do this, right? And I feel like it's something that I have interest in, right? And I could pursue that. And I don't necessarily think I have to go to school to do that. I know I can learn it online in a different kind of community.
Or you could come up to the Snow Day Learning Lab. I'll get the sewing machine out and I'll teach you how to hem your pants.
Why don't I just bring my pants here and you hem it, and then I'll give you a nice little thank you card.
Remember, you're interested in learning. We just said that.
Yes. Yeah. But I think that when we say that they have little to no interest in learning, I think it's partly the interest in learning the things that we are telling them to learn.
Yes.
And we know that is very arbitrary and subjective, right? So what we learn in school is not necessarily all things that are essential to learn in life either.
Yeah, 100%. And when you have a classroom full of students, they have different interests. They have different prior experiences. They have different goals. They have different breakfasts before they come to school. And there's a range of what each of them are ready for in a given day. And a lot of the work that I do and people in my area of research do is focusing on how do we think about building, tools, technologies, curriculum, classrooms, pedagogy that can support young people finding those interests that they're passionate about and then pursuing them and exploring them in educational settings. And the most common response I get from people is, well, that sounds hard. Sounds like that would take a lot of time. How are you going to do that in a classroom full of kids?
Yeah. And you know what? My response to that would be, it is hard. It's supposed to be.
Boom. It is hard. Get over it and do the work.
Yeah. It's supposed to be hard. But I feel like the payoff of that is really like, it's something else, right? to see children really be interested and excited about learning. And I would say like those skills, basic skills that we are trying to build in young people through school can be achieved and attained in those spaces where they're interested in pursuing something of their own, of their own volition.
1,000%. And we have mountains of empirical evidence that suggest that to be true.
Yeah. I think the last part of it too is I'm thinking about the disrespectful getting up and walking around part. And I just started to think about like what we normalize in school settings, right? Like even a very small thing, we were talking about this in class the other day, even a small thing like raising your hand, it's just like so ingrained in us to raise our hands like everywhere we go. But then we don't do that anywhere else but in a classroom setting because it became so normal to us that is the way that we learn to speak. Right?
Yeah.
Like you get reprimanded if you don't raise your hand, right? If you want anything, like to go to the bathroom, to do anything, you raise your hand. If you have a question, you raise your hand. If you have an answer or response, you raise your hand. And I think, that's a small little example, but even like the sitting in a circle, being as still and quiet as possible, like putting bubbles in your mouth while you're walking down the hallway so that you don't say anything, like walking in the straightest line as possible, like in a line, right? Those are arbitrary norms that somebody made up.
Right.
Right. And somehow we've all decided that we're going to follow those arbitrary norms. And I think that statistic is really telling because then it says, teachers struggle with that because maybe perhaps instead of indicting teachers or thinking about curriculum that helps children not walk around, that maybe we shift and change that framing and that it's something else that we decide to do.
Not only are they social norms that somebody has invented, they become stand-ins for whether or not somebody is learning or not, and they're based upon a particular kind of cultural frame of what behavior is appropriate and not appropriate. And that's like, it has all sorts of other problematic aspects to it. Yeah. Kids have to sit, they have to behave in a certain way, they have to speak a certain way, they have to talk a certain way. Not all kids are like that. And in fact, the kids that are, they're not always like that. And that doesn't mean they're not learning when they're not, sitting quietly. It just means that they're, in fact, oftentimes the best learning is the loudest and craziest.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. You're making me think of something that our colleague Lalitha Vasudevan, I've heard her say this before, is that just because their bodies look a certain way does not mean that they're engaged. And just because they seem distracted by a cell phone doesn't always mean that they're disengaged. Right? And so I think sometimes we think about engagement and behaviors and maybe we need to disentangle those two things.
Absolutely. And disrespect is part of that. I actually wrote an article once that I'm quite proud of called...
What's it called?
It was called Constructionism as a Pedagogy of Disrespect. And it was all about the ways in which people, kids in particular, not doing what you want them to do isn't a sign that there's something wrong with the kids. In fact, it's often a sign that there's something you're missing, that you're not doing to kind of enable them to be creative, to enable them to explore, to enable them to sort of follow their interests and their passions. And I think that's a lesson that part of the purpose of that particular article was me reflecting on my own times that I missed that and didn't engage in that. But so many of us do, and there's lots of different reasons why and how we can do that. I want to I have this quote,
of course,
that I quickly had to find here. Because this is one of my favorite quotes from a scholar, the late Michael Eisenberg. In an article in 2012, he said, "Children don't need skills so much as they need, as do we all, a reason to get up in the morning and the morning after that. A person equipped with such a purpose will, as people tend to do, acquire the various skills that they need to achieve it. A person without such a purpose may garner dozens and dozens of skills and spend long months and years in joylessly employing them."
Aww.
Purpose matters, right?
Yes, it does. That's very dark, but very true. And also very hopeful, though.
I find it really hopeful.
Yeah. It does all of those things in one, which is great.
Masterful.
Yeah. So I feel like you're ready to kind of tell us what the solution or the takeaway is. But I'm going to throw something out there. I'm going to ask you to comment. Okay. So recently I came across this idea called the politics of possibility, which is something that Peter Moss, who's like an early childhood scholar, talks about. And he drew that from Loris Malaguzzi, who is kind of credited and the founder of Reggio Emilia philosophy. And so Loris Malaguzzi kind of created this early childhood, like inquiry, play, sort of documentation sort of place in Reggio Emilia post World War II, after after the fall of the Nazi regime, they were trying to rebuild like a very war-torn city, circumstances that were like unimaginable, right? And I think you could look at that and think about the unimaginable loss that a place has, right? But he said, quote, "It was the ridiculous capacity of being able to think anything and to think that anything could be physically realized." And I feel like that's sort of like the contemporary landscape that we see ourselves in, the generations before us have seen themselves in, right? That there is like unimaginable loss, there seems to be hopelessness, like it just seems like everything is sort of broken, right? But that in that brokenness, there's like actually a chance to reimagine something very, very different, right? So what is your what if as we close this?
So, I mean, I think what you just said made me think of COVID, and I don't want to go back to the dark place. I want to stay in the happy place here. But I think we had, this is another example of a time where school could not exist in the way in which we were used to it being. And we had an opportunity to imagine something different, imagine something new. And we didn't, right? What did we imagine? We imagined Zoom school, which was the worst version of school, but on a computer instead. It was like worksheets and lectures, and it was terrible. But there are lots and lots of opportunities and times that we can try to imagine some new version of school, a school that's more centered on young people's passions, as Eisenberg was just talking about, that's more centered on the histories and the experiences of the kids that are in the school or in the classroom, a more social, a more loving, a more joyful space. And that might involve getting up and walking around at random times of the day, right?
Yeah. And I think that's why we've done 6 seasons of Pop and Play, because we really believe that there is a space for play and inquiry to be happening in classrooms. And maybe that is like the pivot that we want to take when we think about pedagogy and curriculum. Yeah.
There's tons and tons of very specific, very practical examples out there. Maybe we can link some of those in the show notes. But I think it starts with kind of this respect, this play attitude.
Yeah. All right. Thanks for another great conversation. We want to give you a reminder that our next play date will be making stuff with wood. And I will say interpret as you will. So
I'm not even sure what we're making with wood yet.
Yeah, exactly. Because I was going to ask, what does that mean? And my answer is whatever you think it means.
That's right. We look forward to playing with wood with you sometime soon. In the meantime, please leave us a comment, send us a message to tell us about your feelings with the episode, what we could do differently, and share it with other people.
Yeah. All right. Thank you for joining us again.
Great. Bye.
Bye.